Unlike the other units and periods for AP World History, Period 5 has 4 key concepts, and the fourth key concept, 5.4, is about global migrations. During this time period, migration patterns changed dramatically throughout, and the numbers of migrants also increased significantly, to people moving from one place to the next. These changes were closely connected to the development of transoceanic empires and a global capitalist economy, which was a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. In some cases, people benefited economically from migrating from one location to another, while other people were seen simply as commodities that had to be transported. They were forced to move along because of the economic climate. In both cases, migration produced dramatically different societies for both the sending and receiving societies, and presented challenges to governments in fostering national identities and regulating the flow of migrants coming into their new countries and leaving their former countries. Looking at this map, we can see examples of the many transcontinental and trans or hemispheric migrations that took place during this time period. In China and India, we can see people moving throughout the continent, so not going to a brand new one, or going to nearby states, not traveling from one hemisphere to the next. We also can see this in Siberia, as Russians expanded further to the east and began to develop and live in more inhospitable areas of Siberia. We also see in the United States, with the colonies expanding west due to manifest destiny and expanding the size of their state, which is a byproduct of nationalism, but also taking over more land and giving people to live there, offering so many acres of land for new farmers that want to move out west. But there's also hemispheric migrations and major maritime migrations, people sailing from one location to a whole other one. In India, we see Indians with influence from Britain sailing to South Africa, another British colony at this time, and we see that their culture then is embedded on that area. We see Africans traveling from West Africa to different parts of the Americas. This is a byproduct of the slave trade, which is abolished during this time period, which lowers and slows down a lot of people migrating from location to location, as well as Africans migrating to Southwest Asia, again part of the slave trade. And in East Asia, we see the Chinese and other East Asian states migrating to North America, as well as the Japanese migrating to North America and to parts of South America and working as migrant workers, especially for the Japanese, coming during growing seasons in these countries and then going back to China or Japan for theirs. And the largest amount of migration we see is from Europeans. Europeans going to different colonies, Australia being a well-known penal colony, a place for prisoners. The British would send prisoners that then turns into a farming colony and then becoming its own state. We see Europeans going to all parts of the Americas to invest in capital opportunities in Central and South America, as well as to just move away and have a new life beginning in North America. So we can see there's lots of migrations, and a big bulk of them, a big bulk of where people went was the Americas. And you can see because the arrow is all kind of converging in one area. I should know that the Americas were a region that experienced a huge population growth and were influenced massively by this big era of global migration. Causes for this migration. There are two kinds. There are push factors and pull factors. Push factors, also typically known as high pressure regions for migration, were events that took place within the nation that would cause people to feel like they need to leave. They're being pushed out of the state and forced to go somewhere else because of events going on in that area. During the Industrial Revolution and the modern era, there's a major spike in population. New food and more food is produced, which leads to longer lifespans. We see new medicine that creates healthier people, and so this combination of healthier people and more food leads to a higher population. That and ties to a lower infant mortality rate, means there's more people that are born and survive, and it creates lots of population pressures. In these areas, you can see this massive spike here, 1800s, and then boom. In these states that have these large populations, looking at Europe, there are less opportunities for work, And so people are forced to leave to find different economic opportunities in places that have less of a high population. It's easier to move. Part of the reasons that people can be pushed out is that they can now hop on a train. They can get on a train or a steamship, and they can travel from one location to the next much easier than ever before. It's easier to travel many, many miles in the past, and it's fast. It's fast, and it's much, much cheaper than whatever it had been. And it's a lot safer. This makes the world a much smaller place, and this, along with canals and telegraphs, which means you can communicate from one location to the next much faster, made it feel safer to travel and migrate from one area to the next. It made this, what was once a major obstacle, just moving geographically, less of a major obstacle. Another major push factor is just political unrest or religious persecution. During we know about our early revolutions at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. But in the middle of the 19th century, in the 1840s, there was a series of revolutions in France, again, and a series of revolutions in Germany and Italy and other states, Austria as well. And these revolutions created a lot of turmoil and political instability. And to avoid this turmoil and to seek more opportunities and more liberal rights, a lot of immigrants left those states, such as Germany, and then migrated to other countries. So we see it in the 1850s, a lot of Germans, 1840s, a lot of Germans migrating out of Germany because of their rebellions, and then settling in the United States, and then moving out west and creating these, lots of well-known breweries, Schlitz and Hams, and Schmidt, all those, and Busch, those German brew companies is a byproduct of those revolutions, people moving away from those revolutions in Germany and then settling in the Americas. The pogroms, these anti-Jewish persecutions led by the Russian czars, where Jewish people could be captured, killed, or removed from villages because of ethnic dislike. That's not something that someone would want to experience, and so we see a lot of Jews migrating out of Russia, either to different states or coming across to whole new areas of the world, hemispheric migration. Another push factor, famines that occurred. The Irish potato famine caused by blight, a actual disease that potatoes contract that kills the potato, makes it unable to be eaten, caused lots of economic crisis as well as a lack of food. This is the famine in Ireland. And because of a lack of support from the British government, many Irish were forced to move to areas where they could receive money, where they could buy food and not be stuck in that poor economic climate and that starving climate of Ireland. Similar situations occurred in East Asia and South Asia and China during the Qing Dynasty this time period. There was a massive drought that lowered the amount of grain that was produced and crops that were produced, which led to lots of starvation. And in South Asia, in India, cotton became this major export commodity. India was specializing in the exportation of particular cotton to Britain so they could make it in their textile plants. India, basically at this point, depending what area you're looking at, being a colony of Britain. But because they're using all their fields to produce cotton, they weren't using their fields to produce domestic or food for the state, subsistence farming. And because they didn't have any food for the state, people starved because they were growing too much cotton. This is a problem that occurs because of improper economic management by the British. Lack of employment, people want to move to find jobs elsewhere, which is related to previous push factors. On the other side, there are pull factors. These are opportunities that are available in other locations that pull people towards them. So like, because one region has this, someone might be enticed to then go to that region. They're pulled towards it because it looks appealing to them. Urbanization, people moving to cities is involved in continental as well as hemispheric migration, people moving rural areas and going to the cities to work in factories. More government services are offered to migrants in cities, so there's for protection and jobs are being promoted. Come to America, and you'll have opportunities for work. There's farmland in areas that are expanding. In Russia, parts of Siberia are being turned into farmable lands, agrarian areas. Canada has an abundance of farmland that can be used depending on the season, and so does the United States, as well as land in South America as well. The Pampas region of what is now Argentina. And what was Argentina back then? Great for farming and settlement. So that there's farmland for people who go and still have their practices, not go into industrialization, they can move there. And if they do want to get involved in the industrial market, they can move to cities, which is doable because of new transportation. The abolition of slavery. created a giant hole for more jobs to be available, because by 1880 slavery is extinct throughout the world. It's no longer allowed, although I should say it's extinct, probably not fair. It still existed, it just was illegal or carried out in different ways. There's new opportunities for indentured servants or people who are migrant laborers to travel from one part of the world to another part to work for a period of time and then travel back, or to migrate to one part of the world and work there for several years until they pay off their debt. So there's new opportunities there because this type of semi-coerced labor is replacing the coerced labor of slavery. The chance for gold, the gold rushes in Australia, Canada, Alaska, California, people seeking this sort of wealth, as well as trying to find diamonds and other resources, people looking for that quick access to gold, oil, depending where they go, an opportunity to find quick riches. And a fresh start, political freedom. Migrants saw, like in America, the streets are paved with gold. Things weren't great where they were because of all those push factors pushing them out. So the idea of a fresh start somewhere else where there is supposedly limitless opportunity was really appealing. That's a pull factor. Types of migrants. You should know that there's different people. Like there's freely relocated. There were slave migrants that were coerced, and there's also semi-coerced migrants and migratory. Freely relocated migrants, people who chose to leave. It might be push factors pushing them out, but it was in the end their decision to move to new areas, to live there and work there and create a new life there. There is coerced and semi-coerced labor, so slavery, African slaves that are being forced to move from Africa or enslaved and then sent to the Americas as laborers. That exists at the beginning of this time period until it becomes abolished at the end. Chinese and Indian indentured servitude, so Indians migrating from India to South America and other locations, Indians going to Southeast Asia and migrating to an area and living with somebody and paying off a debt to help pay for their travel and existence until that debt is paid over. The derogatory term coolie refers to Chinese and other East Asian laborers that migrated from East Asia to Central, South America, and parts of also what is now California, that they would work for periods of time until their debt was paid. And there's also convict labor. Australia, again, famous for being a penal colony. Convicts were sent from Great Britain to Australia to kind of settle the area and bring back resources until eventually becomes a more stabilized state with people that are living there that are not convicts. There's also seasonal migrants, Japanese traveling from Japan to California to work on the railroads different times. That's more of the indentured labor, but to work as farmers and then returning back during the farming season. Lebanese merchants coming to the Americas for trade opportunities, usually considered Syrian and Lebanese. And Italians migrating to Argentina to work on the Pampas farms and then returning back. They were called the golondrinas by people from Argentina because, like the swallows, they had this migratory pattern of coming during the growing season in Argentina and then returning back to Italy for the Italian growing season. Yeah, good to point out with these Chinese indentured servitude in the Americas, a lot of them worked on the transcontinental railroad, especially in the Pacific coast. Effects of migration. We see massive changes in demographics, so European promotion of a large single crop. Latin America, Europeans want places to grow one crop. The United States invests heavily in Central America to have them grow a lot of bananas so they can then purchase them and sell them at a more expensive price in the United States. The farming of guano, fertilizer, animal poop, to use as fertilizer is a big product, and they have literally islands that are just full of poop, animal poop, that is mined and then sold back in other states. So Europeans and Americans taking advantage of colonies in other states to grow a single cash crop, which impacts their economy. We see mostly males migrating and women staying at home in the country they're from, and then women taking over positions that men once had in those countries. We see ethnic enclaves as large groups of new ethnic groups migrate to one area or to new states. They form communities. So the Chinatowns in Washington, D.C., Mexico City, and all around the world, those are common. The fact that cricket is really popular in India, not India, in South America, is because of the cricket players from India bringing it over when they migrated. And we see major population shifts. You can pause this chart and look at these major changes. And we also see huge resentment from the countries that are bringing in new migrants. So with the bulk of new laborers coming in, they're taking jobs from people that already live there, and there's ethnic disputes and dislike that occur seen in the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act and White House